The pilot's smug grin said it all. He thought he'd won before the fight even started. By the time the cops showed up, he was already rewriting the story in his head, casting himself as the hero. It was a crisp morning at Chicago O'Hare, the kind where the terminal buzzed with a chaotic symphony of rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, and the sharp tang of overpriced coffee. 16-year-old Malik Carter stood by gate C-17, earbuds in, scrolling through his phone. His backpack slouched against his sneakers, stuffed with textbooks and a hoodie. He was headed to D.C. for a summer internship at the Federal Aviation Administration, a gig his mom had pulled strings to secure. Malik wasn't just any kind, was sharp, ambitious, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that came from knowing he'd earned his spot. But to Captain Greg Hensley, a 52-year-old pilot with a chip on his shoulder, Malik was just a problem waiting to happen. Hensley had been watching Malik for 10 minutes from across the gate. The boy's oversized hoodie, the way he leaned against the wall, the fact that he was black, it all added up to trouble in Hensley's mind. Never mind that Malik's boarding pass was first class, a perk of his mom's job. Never mind that he was minding his own business. Hensley's gut told him this kid didn't belong, and his gut was never wrong. Or so he thought. "Excuse me, son," Hensley said, striding over with the kind of swagger only a man in a pilot's uniform could muster. His voice was loud, deliberate, drawing eyes from nearby passengers. "You got a ticket for this flight?" Malik pulled out an earbud, frowning.
"Yeah, I do."
He reached for his phone to pull up the boarding pass, but Hensley cut him off. "Don't get smart with me. Let's see some ID too." Hensley's tone was sharp, his hand resting on his hip like he was auditioning for a cop show. Malik's jaw tightened. He'd been through this before: random questions, suspicious glares. It wasn't new, but it still stung. "Why do you need my ID?" "I'm just waiting to board." Hensley's eyes narrowed. "Because I said so. You look like you're up to something, and I'm not letting you on my plane until I'm sure." The words "my plane" hung in the air like a challenge. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, some pretending not to notice, others openly staring. A woman in a red coat whispered to her husband, "What's going on?" A businessman glanced up from his laptop, then quickly looked away. Malik felt the weight of their eyes, the unspoken assumption that he must have done something wrong. "I'm not giving you my ID," Malik said, his voice steady but edged with frustration. "You're not security. You're just a pilot." Hensley's face reddened. "You want to play tough? Fine." He pulled out his phone, dialing airport police with a flourish. "Yeah, this is Captain Hensley at gate C-17. Got a kid here acting suspicious, refusing to show ID. Might be a security risk. Send someone over." Malik's stomach dropped. He wasn't scared, not exactly, but he knew how this could spiral. He'd seen the videos, heard the stories. A black kid, a white guy with authority, and a misunderstanding that could ruin everything. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "You're making a mistake," he said, locking eyes with Hensley. "You don't even know who I am." Hensley smirked. "I know enough." The police arrived faster than Malik expected. 2 officers, one stocky with a buzz cut, the other taller with a clipboard. They approached Hensley first, who launched into his version of events. The suspicious kid, the attitude, the refusal to comply. Malik stood silent, his heart pounding, as the officers turned to him. "Son, let's see your boarding pass and ID," the buzzcut officer said, his tone neutral but firm. Malik handed over his phone and driver's license, his hands steady despite the anger simmering inside. The officer scanned the boarding pass, then glanced at the ID. His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he said nothing, handing the items back. He's cleared to board, the officer said to Hensley. Everything checks out. Hensley's smirk faltered, but he doubled down. That doesn't mean he's not a problem. He was acting shifty, loitering around. I've got a right to question anyone who looks out of place. Out of place, Malik snapped, unable to hold back. I'm literally at my gate with a ticket waiting to board. You're the one making a scene. The taller officer raised a hand. All right, let's all calm down. Kid, you're good to go. Captain, we'll handle it from here. But Hensley wasn't done. I want him searched. Full pat-down, bag check. Everything. I'm not flying with someone I don't trust. The words landed like a slap. Malik's fists clenched, but before he could respond, a new voice cut through the tension sharp, commanding, and unmistakably furious. What the hell is going on here? All eyes turned to a woman striding toward them, her heels clicking against the terminal floor. Dr. Elaine Carter, Malik's mother, was a force of nature in a tailored Navy suit, her FAA badge clipped prominently to her blazer. At 45, she was the youngest director in the agency's history, a trailblazer who'd climbed the ranks through sheer grit and brilliance. Her presence shifted the air in the room, drawing every gaze like a magnet. "Mom," Malik said, relief flooding his voice. Elaine's eyes flicked from her son to Hensley, then to the officers. "Someone better explain why my son is being harassed at his own gate." Hensley's confidence wavered, but he stood his ground. "Ma'am, this isn't about harassment. Your son was acting suspicious, refusing to show ID. Suspicious." Elaine's voice was ice-cold, cutting him off. "He's a 16-year-old with a first-class ticket, headed to an internship I arranged. What exactly is suspicious about that?" The officers exchanged a glance, sensing the shift. The buzzcut one stepped forward. "Ma'am, we were just responding to a call." "And who made that call?" Elaine's gaze locked onto Hensley, who suddenly seemed smaller in his uniform. "You, Captain." "Hensley," he said, his voice less certain now. "Captain Hensley," Elaine repeated, her tone dripping with disdain. "Do you make a habit of profiling passengers? Or is it just black kids who catch your eye?" The accusation hung heavy, drawing gasps from nearby passengers. Hensley's face flushed deeper, but he tried to recover. "This isn't about race. It's about safety. I have a responsibility." "Your responsibility," Elaine interrupted, "is to fly the plane, not play vigilante. You saw a black boy and decided he was a threat. That's not responsibility, that's prejudice." Malik watched his mother, pride swelling in his chest. She wasn't just defending him. She was dismantling Hensley's entire worldview, piece by piece, in front of everyone. The taller officer cleared his throat. "Dr. Carter, we'll file a report and—" "No," Elaine said, her voice unwavering. "This isn't just a report. This is a formal complaint. Captain Hensley's actions endangered my son and disrupted this terminal. I want his conduct reviewed by the airline and the FAA." Hensley's eyes widened. "The FAA? You can't." "I can," Elaine said, stepping closer. "I'm Dr. Elaine Carter, Director of Aviation Safety at the FAA. And you, Captain, just made the worst mistake of your career." The terminal seemed to freeze. Passengers whispered. Phones came out to record, and Hensley's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The officers shifted uncomfortably, realizing they'd walked into a storm. Malik, still clutching his backpack, felt a surge of vindication. He'd been humiliated, singled out, but now the tables were turning. Hensley's arrogance had led him straight into a trap of his own making. "Dr. Carter," the buzzcut officer said cautiously, We'll escort the captain to the security office to sort this out. Good, Elaine said, her voice steady but fierce. And I'll be following up. This isn't over. As the officers led Hensley away, his shoulders slumped, the fight gone out of him. Malik watched, his anger giving way to a quiet resolve. He'd been through worse than this, but today justice wasn't just a hope, it was happening. Right in front of him. Elaine turned to her son, her expression softening. You okay? Malik nodded, a small smile breaking through. Yeah, thanks, Mom. She pulled him into a quick hug, then straightened. Let's get you on that plane. You've got bigger things to do than deal with fools like him. But the story didn't end at the gate. Hensley's actions had set off a chain reaction, one that would unravel his career and force him to confront the ugliness he'd tried to bury. For Malik, it was a moment that would shape him, a reminder that standing tall could change everything. And for Elaine, it was a fight she'd been preparing for her whole life, a chance to show that power, when wielded with purpose, could rewrite the rules. As the officers escorted Captain Greg Hensley away from Gate C-17, the terminal slowly returned to its usual hum, but the air felt charged, like the moment after a lightning strike. Passengers whispered, some stealing glances at Malik and Elaine, others tapping furiously on their phones, uploading videos of the confrontation. Malik adjusted his backpack, his heart still racing, but a quiet strength settled in his chest. He'd been through moments like this before, stares, assumptions, accusations, but this time, he wasn't alone. His mother's presence was a shield, and her authority was a sword. Elaine Carter, still radiating a calm fury, guided Malik toward the boarding line. Don't let this ruin your day, she said, her voice soft but firm. You're here for a reason. Focus on that. Malik nodded, but his mind was still replaying Hensley's smug face. The way he'd called him suspicious, like it was a fact carved in stone. He wanted to believe it was over, but he knew better. Men like Hensley didn't just walk away, they doubled down, deflected, or disappeared only to resurface with the same biases. Malik had seen it in teachers who didn't mean it, in store clerks who followed him just in case. But this time, the stakes were higher, and the consequences were real. Meanwhile, in the airport security office, Hensley sat across from the two officers, his arms crossed tightly. The buzzcut officer, Officer Daniels, typed notes into a laptop, while the taller one, Officer Ruiz, leaned against the wall, watching Hensley with a neutral but piercing gaze. Look, Hensley started, his voice low. I was just doing my job. That kid was acting off, loitering, not cooperating. I've got a plane full of passengers to protect. Daniels didn't look up from his screen. Your job is to fly the plane, Captain, not to play gatekeeper. You called us on a kid with a valid ticket and no record of trouble. Hensley's jaw tightened. You don't get it. I've been flying for 20 years. I know trouble when I see it. Ruiz raised an eyebrow. And what exactly did you see? A black kid with a backpack? That's your trouble? Hensley's face flushed, but he didn't back down. It's not about race. It's about instinct. You guys know how it is, sometimes you just know. Daniels stopped typing, his eyes meeting Hensley's. Instinct's not enough to call us out and humiliate a kid in front of 100 people. You better hope your instinct holds up when the FAA reviews this. Hensley's confidence cracked. The FAA? She was bluffing. She can't. She's Dr. Elaine Carter, Ruiz cut in, Director of Aviation Safety. She doesn't bluff. The room fell silent. Hensley's hands unclenched, then clenched again. He'd heard of Elaine Carter, everyone in aviation had. She was a legend, a black woman who'd shattered glass ceilings and rewritten safety protocols that pilots like him followed every day. The realization hit him like a punch. He hadn't just crossed a passenger. He'd crossed one of the most powerful people in his industry. Back at the gate, Malik boarded the plane, settling into his first-class seat. The flight attendant, a young woman named Tara, gave him a warm smile. "You okay, Han?" she asked, her voice low enough to keep it private. "Yeah," Malik said, managing a small grin. "Just ready to get to DC." Tara nodded, her eyes flickering with understanding. "You're gonna do great things. I can tell." As the plane taxied to the runway, Malik stared out the window, the Chicago skyline shrinking below. He thought about his internship, the chance to work on aviation tech, to prove himself in a world where people like Hensley assumed he didn't belong. But he also thought about his mom, how she'd stood up for him, not just as his mother but as someone who could change the game. He pulled out his phone and texted her. "Thanks for having my back." Elaine, now in her car heading to a meeting, smiled at the message. But her mind was already on the next steps. She'd meant what she said. A formal complaint was just the beginning. Hensley's actions weren't just a personal attack on her son. They were a symptom of a deeper problem, one she'd fought her entire career. As a black woman in aviation, she'd faced her own share of Hensley's men who questioned her credentials, dismissed her expertise, or assumed she was diversity hire. She'd clawed her way to the top despite them, and she wasn't about to let this slide. By the time Malik's plane landed in DC, the story was spreading. A passenger's video of the confrontation had gone viral on X, racking up thousands of likes and retweets. The hashtag Justice for Malik trended, with comments ranging from outrage to support. "This is why we can't trust authority figures," one user posted. "Kid was just existing, and this pilot tried to ruin him." Another wrote, "Shout out to that mom. She's a queen." But there were darker corners of the internet, too, where Hensley found defenders. "The pilot was just being cautious," one post argued. "You can't take risks in airports." Elaine saw the posts during a break in her meeting. She wasn't surprised by the divide. People always found ways to justify prejudice. But the support for Malik gave her hope. She forwarded the video to her team at the FAA, along with a note. "This incident requires a full investigation. I want a report on Captain Hensley's conduct by end of week." Back in Chicago, Hensley was suspended pending review. His airline, under pressure from the viral video and Elaine's complaint, issued a statement. "We take allegations of discrimination seriously and are cooperating with the FAA." Hensley, holed up in his apartment, watched the news spiral out of control. His phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, some supportive, others distant. His wife, Karen, tried to reassure him. "You were just doing your job, Greg. They'll see that." But Hensley wasn't so sure. He'd acted on impulse, driven by a mix of ego and bias he hadn't even recognized in himself. Now, that impulse was costing him everything. The FAA investigation wasn't just a formality, it was a career ender. Elaine Carter's team dug into his record, uncovering a pattern. Complaints from minority passengers, ignored warnings about overstepping his role, and a reputation for being old school in the worst way. Malik, meanwhile, threw himself into his internship. The FAA's DC office was a whirlwind of activity engineers, analysts, and policymakers working on cutting-edge aviation tech. Malik's project involved drone navigation systems, and he quickly impressed his supervisor, Dr. Patel, with his knack for problem-solving. But the airport incident lingered. At lunch one day, he confided in a coworker, Jada, about what happened. "That pilot's lucky your mom was there," Jada said, shaking her head. "But it's messed up you even had to go through that." "Yeah," Malik said, poking at his sandwich. "It's like, no matter what I do, someone's always gonna see me as a threat." Jada nodded. "I get it. My brother's been stopped for looking suspicious too." But you're here now, killing it. That's how you win. Malik smiled, her words sinking in. He wasn't just here to prove himself to Hensley or anyone else. He was here to build something, to leave a mark. Weeks later, the FAA's investigation concluded. Hensley's license was revoked, a decision Elaine personally oversaw. The airline fired him, citing conduct unbecoming. The news hit X like wildfire, with justice for Malik trending again. Some celebrated, others cried cancel culture. Hensley, now jobless, faced a reckoning. In a rare moment of clarity, he watched the viral video again, seeing himself through the passenger's eyes, arrogant, aggressive, wrong. He didn't apologize publicly. Pride wouldn't let him. But alone, he wondered how he'd let his instinct blind him so completely. For Malik, the victory was bittersweet. He'd won, but the cost was a reminder of how fragile fairness could be. He kept working, excelling at his internship, and even pitched a new safety protocol inspired by his experience, one that required bias training for all airline staff. Elaine, beaming with pride, pushed it through. The story didn't erase the divide in the comments section or the world beyond. But it sparked conversations about justice, about prejudice, about the power of standing up. Malik's internship ended with a commendation, and he returned to Chicago not as a victim, but as a young man who'd faced fire and walked out stronger. What do you think? Where does the line fall between caution and prejudice? How do we balance justice with understanding in a world quick to judge?